Toba. Is it still snowing in Minnesota? Because it's really hot here in Florida. Oh, the birthday girl is here, Bashalea. Happy birthday to you. You shared the birthday with one of the Rebbes. Shira, hi. Wow, so far we have Los Angeles, Minnesota, Miami, and Sedona, Arizona online. So that's really nice. International. So today is Bashalea's birthday, and we're very excited. We're going to share a few beautiful blessings in a minute. So I'll just let a few more people come on. And Sherry with the purple hearts. That's what I like to see, purple hearts. So Doba, you and I are on the same time zone. And everybody else is more awake than we are. Oh no, Doba, you're behind me on the time zone. I think Minnesota's not the same as Miami. So I am in Miami. Shirley, do you miss me? I'm in Miami. And it's Bashalea's birthday. You're an hour behind me. Okay, so I'm the one who's going to get tired, either the first or the last. Hi, Deborah. Welcome to the class. And I've warned my kids. Oh, Shirley, look at those beautiful hearts. That's so nice. So there's a lot to learn tonight. I will see. I'm already excited, pumped up. So, but I am in Miami with my beautiful family. And the weather is just delicious. It's hot, but not too hot. That's what I wish we had in California, those nice hot nights. Jill has the hot nights in Palm Springs. Sarah Lydia from Yerushalayim. Yom, oh my gosh. We're going to talk about Myrna, guarding my swimming pool while I'm away. So we're going to start. So l'chaim, everybody. So I want to start off with, I just want to repeat how many international people we have here. We have Sarah Lydia from Yerushalayim, and I wish she could speak. Now, I'd even share, I'd share my time with you, because in Israel right now, it's Yom Ha'atzmaut, it's Israel Independence Day, and Sarah Lydia was so kind this morning to send me such a thrilling video of the marching with flags and just the excitement in the air. Another friend sent me fireworks, going on, and there's dancing in the streets, and there's bands, and there's performances, and there's such an excitement and a love of Israel today. So we should all say l'chaim for the continued peace and safety of the Holy Land. Today is the day of tremendous celebration, the day, preceded, sad to say, of the day of the honoring of all those who gave their lives for Israel. And so you go from one intense day, which is, people's hearts just are weeping for those, soldiers and victims and people who have died preserving the state of Israel. And then you go to this day of joy, of rebirth, and of the reclaiming of the Holy Land. And it's really something just spectacular to be there. And Mirz Hashem, Mashiach should come, and we should all be we're all coming to Sarah Lydia's house for breakfast. Hi, Beth. Welcome. So, Sarah Lydia, as soon as Mashiach comes, hi, Adrian, be prepared for all of us to come. Okay, so we're going to begin the class today, and I, first of all, want to wish Bashalea a tremendous Mazel Tov for her birthday. Today was her birthday, base ER, the second day of the month of ER. And I just want to go over, because I think it's really important, the customs of a Hebrew birthday. Oh, Myrna's going to help cook for the Yom Ha'atzmaut celebration that we're all going to. So, everybody has a Hebrew birthday, and if you do not know your Hebrew birthday, you have two options. One is you can text or email me, and the other option is you can go on Chabad.org and look up Hebrew birthday, and there's a calendar, and you put in your English birthday, and they will tell you when your Hebrew birthday is and when it falls out this year. And on your Hebrew birthday, it's the day that your soul is just radiating the light that it came into the world with, and how important you are to be here and to be celebrating. And from the Rebbes, from the Lubavitch Rebbes, there are many customs for your Hebrew birthday. So one is, don't be embarrassed and make a party, okay? That we want to celebrate with you. We want to say l'chaim. We want to have good food. We want to say blessings. We want to learn Torah. So on your Hebrew birthday, the custom is that you give extra charity for that day, extra tzedakah. That you say your psalm. Now your psalm, yes, this is your party, and I'm only having water, so that's a failing. Send over that bottle of wine. But if I had wine, I wouldn't be able to teach the class. So I'm going to have water, and then when we're together, I'll have the l'chaim, because these days wine puts me to sleep in about 3 minutes. So l'chaim to being at the party with Bashalea. So everybody has a psalm, and your psalm is your age plus 1. So if you are 31, your psalm is for the year is 32. If you are 41, your psalm for the year is 42. So on your Hebrew birthday, you say the psalm for the age that you were previously. So you say, let's say you were 31 last year and you're turning 32 this year. So you would say Psalm 32 and Psalm 33. So you say your psalm for the previous year and for the year that's coming up. You give extra tzedakah. You make a decision of something that you want to take on for the coming year. Hi, Sarah Anthea. That you want to take on, either doing a mitzvah you're already doing better. I used to, in the old days, I had a walking partner, and we used to end up, going to Starbucks at the end, and then she'd buy me, that was my payment for walking with her. And then I'd walk home. And one day I saw my neighbor. Her name, she's no longer alive, but her name was Heidi Katz. And I saw her walking. She was walking her dog, and I said, okay, I'll walk a few blocks with you, just so we could chat and be out together. And every house that we went by, she stopped, and when there was a newspaper on the sidewalk, she picked up the newspaper and she put it by the front door. And then she said to me, I'm doing this because of you. And I go, really? I said, I don't know when I've ever told anybody to pick up a newspaper and put it by the front door. And she said she had come to my birthday that year. I had invited her to my birthday party. And I talked about making a commitment, making a good decision, taking on a mitzvah, taking on something for the year, for your birthday. And she said a few months later, hi, Emily. She said a few months later, it was her birthday, and she decided to take on that every morning on her walk with her dog. When she would see somebody's newspaper on the sidewalk, she would bring it to their front door, so when they got up in the morning, they could have it right there and they wouldn't have to exert themselves. So to take on something for the year, to meditate on your spiritual commitment or your spiritual purpose of what you want to do in the coming year, and to make a party and to celebrate. So we are celebrating Bashalea's Hebrew birthday. It should be a year of blessing. And here's the good news for anybody who's watching that is kind of my age, near my age, and is looking for their holy soulmate and wants to get married. So we should say l'chaim to Bashalea, who recently got married. And I was privileged to be at the wedding of 15 people. And it was thrilling to be there and to walk her around the chuppah. And she should have blessings. She and David should have blessings till 120. That's anniversary years, not age. And then they can renegotiate. So I know that Bashalea is giving everybody their blessing today. That those people, L'chaim Nomi, another Yom Ha'atzmaut celebrator, that those people who were looking for their holy soulmates, that Bashalea on her birthday is blessing everybody, that they should find them with ease and in such a beautiful way as she did, that they should bring them to me for the stamp of approval, oh yes, and that we celebrate together in the holy city in Yerushalayim. I also would like to dedicate this year to a beautiful woman. Her name was Hannah Fradel Bas Reb Moshe Bunim. Anybody from Los Angeles who might have known her, her name was Hannah Arnold. And she passed away. She was buried yesterday. And she had an illness and she left this world very rapidly. And she was the teacher who taught almost every single one of my children how to read. She was a first grade teacher in the Chabad schools. And many of my grandchildren, the ones that lived in Los Angeles, were her students also. And so her soul should have just the highest of aliyahs, and she is really missed. She will be missed for my future generations that are coming to school. So I want to speak first about the Rebbe Marash, who today was his birthday, just like Bashalea's. And the Rebbe Marash was a Rebbe, one of the Chabad Rebbeim. His name was Reb Shmuel. And he was born, I think, in 1833. And he was very well known for a very famous phrase. And the phrase was Lahachila Ariba. And I'm going to explain it in a minute. We're going to talk about him first, then we're going to talk about Sfiras HaOmer, and we're going to talk about the Parsha a little bit also. We're going to do quite a few different things. But I want to really begin by reading I guess it was something that was sent to me last week. And I actually wanted to talk about it in class last week and read it, and somehow I didn't have the papers with me, and so I'm going to do it this week because I think it was something that touched my heart, and I want to share it with everybody. So last week's was Parsha Shmini, and on it there was something that there was a yortzeit that happened. The yortzeit was around last Shabbos. It was on the 24th of Nisan. And the yortzeit, the person who died in 1854, and her name was Sasha Mindel Hertzberg. And her maiden name was actually Kluger Hertzberg. And she was not famous for anything. She was not a famous Rebbetzin. She was not famous for anything she did. And she was married for a very short time, and she passed away in 1854. And there's a very well-known rabbi who lived in Jerusalem. His name was Rabbi Shlomo Zalman Auerbach. He passed away in 1995. He was actually a halachic medical expert in Israel. He just really helped people tremendously. And he said he was born 56 years after this woman, Sasha Mindel, and yet every year on her yortzeit, he said Kaddish for her. And so the question is asked, why would he do that? And this is her story, and I'm telling her story because I think as most of us that are on this class are women, and I think it's really very important to hear it and to be able to open our hearts to support other people that are in the same situation. So Sasha Mindel's grandfather, his name was Rabbi Shlomo Kluger, and he was very, very famous. He was a Talmid Chacham, which means he was a Torah scholar, and he lived in Poland in the town of Brody. It was a very famous Torah center, and he was one of the most famous that there was. It says that almost everybody who is involved in the Torah world would know who he was. He was a star, and he was the author of over 160 works. So we could see that he was pretty prolific. And one of the works that he published in 1854, the title is Nidre Zerizin. And it's a very scholarly book, but what is unique is the dedication in it. And in this book, he dedicated this to his granddaughter, who was Sasha Mindel. And the title page reads the following: I am publishing this word as a memorial and for the sake of the soul of my dear and wise granddaughter, Sasha Mindel, who died at an early age. She was the daughter of my son, Rav Chaim Yehuda, and she passed away on Shabbos Kodesh Parsha Shmini on the 24th day of Nisan in the year 1854. So what was the story with her? And in the introduction, he also wrote that anybody who reads the book should say Kaddish for her on her yahrzeit. And his granddaughter grew up in his home, so he was very, very close to her, and he was personally involved in her shidduch. And he made a lot of inquiries. He looked into it, and he thought he was marrying her into a very holy family, a Torah family, but that is not actually what happened. And he describes the evilness of the family that she married into, and that he had been lied to by people who told him about the shidduch. And he called the family, the man she married and his father-in-law, very evil people. And he describes what happened. And she basically, without going into description, was an abused woman in the mid-1850s. And because of the abuse, she became very, very ill very quickly after she was married at a very young age. And only because somebody randomly told him, he might have never found out, but somebody just randomly told him, and he worked very hard to take her out of the home, and he brought her home, but she was very ill and very broken by that time, and she died young. And he personally asked God for vengeance against this family, and he wrote in this memorial that whoever reads his book, he requested it, people say Kaddish for her, and that the book should be a memorial to her soul. And then, so Rabbi Shlomo Zalman Auerbach had studied this book, and he read it, and he said Kaddish for her for every year. And her grandfather wanted her people to know about spousal abuse, that she suffered in silence, and only because somebody just randomly told him about it was he even able to extricate her. So and here's what he said people should do, and it's connected to this week's Parsha, that first of all, he was a giant in Israel, and he felt the need to publicize this tragedy that she underwent. And he even named, which is a very big thing because of all the laws of Lashon Hara, of not speaking about other people, he put in the sefer the names of the father and father-in-law. That's how important he thought it was, that there shouldn't be silence about it. And he said the most important thing to rectify this would be to learn the laws of Lashon Hara properly, because he said this wouldn't have happened if people had been honest with him. And that the second is not to let anybody suffer in silence. And I just want to say, somebody came to me or was at my house a few weeks ago, and she said a very good friend of hers just got engaged, and very quickly, and she knows some things about the boy and the family, and should she say something? So as far as I know, I'm not a halakhic expert, but what I have learned is that when it comes to a shidduch, people must be brutally honest. So it's not that a person can't investigate it, and it's not that a person can't find out. Sometimes people will say the truth. Sometimes people will make things up. But the point is that it should not be ignored, that people have to speak up, and you can do it in a very sneeze way. You could do it through a rabbi, you could do it through a rebbitzin. You don't have to do it directly to the family. You can say, I believe this is true if you're not sure. If you basically have information, but that it is very important in terms of a shidduch that people don't keep quiet, that you are able to speak up, and that also when you see somebody suffering, that people have to be encouraged, to be supported. And we should take this on in the name of this young woman, Sasha Mindel Basrev Chaim Yehuda, who her grandfather begged that this information be out, and he wrote this 166 years ago. So I wanted to share it because this week's Parsha also is including, it's a double Parsha, Tazria Mitzorah, and it also includes talking about Lashon Hara, and it talks about leprosy also as a result of people talking Lashon Hara, and so I thought we'd combine it a little and really be able to stand up for people that might not have the courage to stand up for themselves. So I wanted to share that. So Basiyar, Bashalea's birthday, and Myrna's leaving. We'll miss you. So Bashalea's birthday, the saying of the Rebbe Marash, he was very well known for saying, Lahatchila Ariba, meaning to leap over. It says, if the world says, if you can't get something accomplished and you can't do it in a normal way, then just leap over it. Take a big leap. But he says, but I say from the beginning, leap. From the beginning, take a leap. And that means to leap over obstacles. And without going into a lot of details, I was at a Farbrengen with the Rebbe when he was talking about the Rebbe Marash at this point. And that was a very instrumental in encouraging me to be married and to marry my husband. And there were a few big things that were there, and just go for it. Just leap over it and go for it. So on this day, we are given the power to strengthen ourselves in this ability. And what does it mean when we're saying that you go over it? That it's not the end. It's not like you've tried something, small steps, and then it doesn't work and all of a sudden you go for the big thing. No, he's saying from the beginning, leap over it. From the beginning, go for the big thing. And that's only the beginning. Because Yiddishkeit is alive, and we're called movers, we're called goers, angels are called standers. Angels don't move, they're called standers. But when we talk about halacha, it means to go. Halacha meaning, Hebrew word meaning law, it means to go in Hebrew. So this concept of lahatchila ariba, to leap, to take a leap over, we connect this to the birth of the Rebbe Marash, because it says the day you're born, Bashalea, the time you're born, the house you're born in, the hour you're born, the month you're born, all of it is by divine providence. All is hashgacha pratis, and it's giving you a certain energy. This is your gift, and you are given the power to leap over any obstacles in your way. And the uniqueness about this month of Iyar is called the month of healing. It says, Ni Hashem Rofecha. It's an acronym of the word Iyar. I am God, your healer. So in this month, also the word Iyar, the letters Aleph, Yud, Yud, Resh stand for Avraham, Yitzhak, Yaakov, and Rachel. And it says these four, the patriarchs and matriarch, are the basis of the spiritual work of the Jewish people. And in this month of Iyar, Iyar is a month that has a mitzvah for every day. And what is that mitzvah? The mitzvah is the counting of the Omer, which we are going to talk about. And what is this mitzvah? And why is it unique? Because it's a mitzvah where each Jew is working on themselves every single day. And so we call Avraham, Yitzhak, Yaakov, and Rachel like the chariot, the wheels, the four wheels of the chariot that move us forward, that move the Jewish people forward. And when we work on ourselves, we develop our emotions and we develop our inner abilities that we have. And this is precious to God. This is what is precious to Hashem. And we're given the ability to work on ourselves in an inner way with the inner Torah. And we take a step back and we realize that when it comes to any time that we need to go forward. We need to see what is the call, what is the call of the hour. And when we come to a Yom Tov, like we just had Passover, we're going to have Lag Bomer coming up, then we're going to have Shavuos. It's not a commemorative event. It says we are now moving through the days of the Omer. We are moving to receiving the Torah. And we're receiving it anew. We are preparing ourselves through the counting of the Omer, coming from Pesach, to receive it anew today. I mean, when Shavuos comes, but this year, to receive it anew. And when we count the Sphira each day, I counted the Sphira already today, and it's the 18th day of the Sphira, we're not commemorating, those Jews then counted. This is alive, it's living. Torah is living. It's living for us in the present. And it's preparing us each day that we're counting the Omer, we're counting the qualities. It's preparing us to receive the Torah. And there's a lot to learn, but I feel maybe I should back up a little, just in case anybody is really not so clear on what we're talking about. So it says that there are 7 spheros, there are 7 divine emanations. Chesed, which is loving kindness. Gevurah, which is justice or strength. Tiferes, which is beauty, and we're in the week of Tiferes. And each has within each week, there's all the spheros are interrelated. So today, which is the birthday of the Rebbe Marash and Bashaleya, was Tiferes in Tiferes. Tonight is Netzach in Tiferes. On the first night of this week, it was Chesed, loving kindness in beauty. So it's all inter-included in each other. And we count for 49 days of the Omer. And we're going to go into some of this in detail, but I'm just going to try to give a little overview. And each of the 49 days corresponds to a particular compound of 2 spheros. So as we said today for the Rebbe Marash, it was Tiferes in Tiferes. And Osara Mazel Tov. There are a lot of people that are so lucky to share the holiness of the Rebbe Marash as their birthday. So in counting the Omer, we're compounding these emanations, and they're each called a sphera, and each correspond to an emotive attribute in our own personalities, in our own spiritual personalities, and we're rectifying them. We're fixing them. We're working on them. It should be in our consciousness. That's what we're doing, and not just like knocking them off like the Jews did in the past, but we're, and we're going to go into exactly what this offering is. So we're rectifying it for each day, and we're counting for each day. So today, for the Rebbe Marash and Bashalea and Sarah's daughter, it's Tiferes Shabbat Tiferes, beauty within beauty. And it goes on to teach that every action in this physical world has a dual effect. And it says it not only affects one of these aspects of the component of the 49 attributes in the soul, but also in the heavenly realms. So it's on so many multi-levels. For an example, that if one does, God forbid, an undesirable action, there is a blemish in that sphere. And the prayer that follows after we count the Omer and we say what day it is, every day we say, may it be your will that whatever blemish I have caused, let's say in Tiferes should be rectified, because there is impurity in the different emanations, and there is purity, and we're gonna go on to learn about that. So this Tiferes, which is beauty, implies what it says: beauty, compassion, the synthesis of chesed, kindness, and strength. And anyway, so I'm going to leave it at that and just go on with this teaching. So, but it's overall what we're talking about when we're talking about the Sphira. Okay, so each day is one in its own, and we're preparing to receive the Torah, and we're connecting to the Sphira, to the energy emanation of each day, and it's about our spiritual work. It's not coming from above. Like the month of Nisan, the month that Passover was in, it says the arousal was from above. How do we know that? Because God took us out of Egypt in a minute. That was from above. But now the working on our spiritual work is from below to above. So that we offered the Omer, and what was the Omer? The Omer was a barley offering because it was considered food, animal food. I know most of us health food people like barley, but in the times of the temple, it was just considered animal food. And what are we doing? We're bringing our animal. That was the sacrifice. You're bringing your animal connected to your animal soul, not your little pet turtle, but you're bringing your animal soul, your emotional struggles, your animal struggles, what you need to fix, what you need to refine. This is what you're bringing in this offering, and every day you bring one more. So the Sphira go over a period of 7 weeks, and each one has an emotional attribute for each week, and each has 7 levels of each emotion, and it looks like order. You go step 1, step 2, you go chesed of chesed, gevura of chesed, tiferes of chesed, netzach of chesed, and the next week you go chesed of gevura, gevura of gevura, and so on. So you're like going step by step, and it looks like order. But the Rebbe Marash teaches us something different. He's not saying, like take your first step, take your second step. He's saying start leaping, leap over it from the beginning. So that spring forward. So this is his path. Why was he born in the month of Iyar, where the counting of the Sphira is taking us step by step, step by step. So, and he's into leaping and springing forward. So, so also that the month of Iyar follows the month of Nisan, and it's the culmination of the month of Nisan. And the message of Iyar is, first we go from one level to the other, we're elevating it, and again, the Rebbe is asking the question of how does this work with the life work of the Rebbe Marash. So we know that the word sphera, we're counting the sphera, we're counting these emanations. Also, there's a relationship to the word sapphire, which means sapphire, radiant, glowing, lit up. So it's saying that when we're counting the sphera, counting the omer, each one should be radiant. Each one should be lit up. This is our work in this month of Iyar. Every day is to make our emotional self, because we're working on those aspects, radiant and lit up. This is what we're supposed to be doing. We're not, I was going to say we're not supposed to be lying on the beach sunbathing, but now that I'm in Miami, I have been found to be guilty of that. So it says, God is saying, first, I'm giving you light. So when the world was created, Torah or light was created first. And God says, I'm giving you light. And then he hid this light. And where did he hide it? He hid it in the Torah. And the light you shine is the light of Torah, and you want to shine it on your life like a little flashlight. Like it's so cute. I'm here with grandchildren, and I'm here because I'm helping my kids. My daughter-in-law is getting her master's and has a lot of work to do this week, presenting her thesis and many other things. And I came back, twist my arm to help with my grandchildren. And so I'm putting my grandkids to bed one night, and one of my granddaughters, she's under the covers, with a flashlight, reading a book when she's supposed to be in bed. And I laughed, and I told her my whole childhood, I did the same thing. I took these books, and I was supposed to go to sleep, and I had a flashlight, and I was reading in my bed. But we want to shine a light. That's what we're doing. We want to shine a light. We want to see clearer. We want to shine this light on our life to make it clear, to make our emotional self refined and uplifted. And it says, how does this work? How does the counting of the Omer work? So it says, when do we start to count? On the day after Shabbos, we begin the first day after Pesach. And in Israel, that is celebrating right now as we speak. Everybody's celebrating in Israel the beauty and the birth and the continuation of our Holy Land. That in Israel, the Seder is one night, and where we are outside of Israel, it's 2 nights. And that is the night we start to count. And why does it say after Shabbos? Because it's saying after the spiritual work of Pesach. It's like the time of reflection and rest. It's jumping. We're going to jump now from Pesach. We're jumping to the Omer. We're jumping to a day after. And we're going forward. And we're springing forward. Because in the month of Nisan, everything was about jumping. What happens? Hashem jumped over the homes of the Jews. That he passed over the homes. He leaped over each of the homes, going forward, and he's telling us once you jump over something, there has to be a continuation. You have to keep jumping. You have to keep leaping. You can't now say, oh, I'm tired, I'm just going to walk slowly. And what is the greatest challenge that we have is not to find inspiration, but it's to sustain the inspiration. This is like so important, because we can find the inspiration. There are flashes of beauty, there's flashes of knowledge, there's flashes of awe, but how do we sustain it? This is and we need to sustain it, especially in the counting of the Omer. And this is not easily found in our everyday life, and there is this energy that comes into this month of Iyar, and we have to live with this every day. It has to be exciting for us every day. And it tells us there are 2 days of meaning. It's not standing on its own. It's a cumulative effect when you count. So you have to count based on the days that came before. We're building. So today is the 18th day of the Omer. So we've had day 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, and so on till day 18. So that's how we're counting. We're counting in a cumulative way. We're bringing everything that we've counted forward with us. We're not standing on its own. Each day is not standing on its own. And you have to count based on the days that came before. And we're building. So what happened in the month of Nisan, which is the month of Pesach, which we just passed? God in his wisdom is continuing Pesach for us. Pesach is not over, even though we can eat pizza, but Pesach is not over. There's the continuation of that spiritual work of what we were doing on Pesach. And this continues in the counting of the Sphira. So we count every day and we make every day count. And we are adding. Otherwise, what will happen? If we're springing forward, we have to keep going higher and higher. That's what's going to happen from springing forward. So it is hard to be better today than yesterday. That is really what we're doing. We're trying to be better today than yesterday. And not to let yesterday pull us down and not to look back, but always to look forward. You know, one of the things, the beautiful things I learned about Hasidus is that we look at what you are doing, not what you're not doing. So if I say to somebody, you know, please light Shabbos candles and you want to go, you know, disco dancing. I said that to a Grandma Roz, who was 78 years old when she began to light Shabbos candles. Because we're looking at what you are doing. We're not looking at what you're not doing. We're looking, that's the Hasidic eye. We're looking at what you're doing. So we want to be better every day. And this is hard. This is not like, you know, going to the movies and eating popcorn. This is, or having l'chaim on water. This is hard spiritual work. And this is how we transform the world. We were created to have a job in the world, and the job is to be purposeful. And the Rebbe says that the avoda, the spiritual work of the days of the Sphira, are after we count, and what do we say? Master of the universe, I will become pure and sanctified from the holiness from above. So we're asking to rectify these different levels and bring us holiness in order to fix our souls and our spirits. And our neshamas should sanctify what? God, with the holiness, because our finite soul wants to connect with the infinite God. And if we don't connect to our infinite self, it will look like a burden to us. But if we connect to our infinite self as a Jew, then infinity won't scare us. We do this to receive the Torah anew, and we will get a new Torah each time. Each time a holiday comes, it's new. There's a new light that comes into the world. It's living. It's called the living Torah. And it says that Jews, God, and Torah are one. And if we learn Hasidus and we fortify ourselves with the idea of an infinite God, it won't feel strange to us because it's not tiresome. Searching for infinity is not tiresome. And now we can understand why the Rebbe Marash was born in the month of Iyar, because we have to know from the beginning, because he's saying leap from the beginning. So we have to know from the beginning that we go beyond and we live a life that goes beyond. And this quality of Tiferes, this beauty, is beyond limitations. And it's a combination. It goes beyond the chesed, the loving kindness, and the gevurah, the strength. And so the Rebbe Marash and Bashalea and Sarah's daughter are all born on Tiferes Shabbat Tiferes. Beauty beyond limitations, and beauty of beauties. And what is the message of this? And the message of this is that we have to embrace our own beauty. So L'chaim. And we're going to, so I want to just say I studied this teaching with my wonderful teacher, Faye Yamini, and my dear friend, and Rebbetzin Yamini. And now I want to go over a teaching that I studied with Rebbetzin Friedman. I talk about her a lot. And this is also a very mind-blowing teaching having to do with the time of the Sfiras HaOmer and a little bit about the Parsha. And I just want to say, I wanted to share a story. I wrote it down. I don't remember why I wanted to share this particular story in this class, but I remembered that I did. So in between the teachers, I'm going to share this particular story. So, excuse me. So when my father passed away, Sarah, I'm going to read this later because I can't read and speak at the same time. She was learning a Sikha where the Rebbe Marash was saying something, but now it's a cliffhanger. Okay, so we'll get back to you. So the year my father passed away, my mother took my husband and I on a kosher cruise to Alaska. It was a Chazin's cruise, and we flew to Vancouver. And from there, we went on a ship with 500 religious Jewish people who wanted to be on a kosher cruise. And the name of the ship was the Volendam. And when we were flying over, my mother actually told me the following story, which later on, when she sat at the captain's table, she told him the following story. So in 1939, my mother had two sisters that were older than her, and one of her sister Sylvia, had been engaged to a man, and eventually they did get back together, but at that time he had broken off the engagement, and she was very, very sad. So their father sent them, my mother with her sister, on a 12-day cruise to Cuba. I remember my mother telling me, she had to borrow evening gowns because she had to have an evening gown every night. So I could just reassure you that on the cruise I took, I did not take one evening gown. We did not wear evening gowns. But my mother went on the Volendam, and 12 days they were on this cruise. And when they came back to New York, the ship was under the Holland American line, and the ship went back to Holland. And eventually it was bombed and destroyed by the Nazis. 2 years before we went on this cruise, they rebuilt the ship, and they named it the Volendam in memory of the ship that was destroyed by the Nazis. And I don't know, the whole thing I found so exciting. And if my mother hadn't been on the ship, nobody would have known the story, actually, because it wasn't told, that the Nazis came, they tried to destroy the Jews, they tried to destroy the world, and we were on the rebuilt Volendam, and who was on that ship? The ship was taken over by religious Jews that were alive and thriving and celebrating seeing the glaciers falling in Alaska. So I wanted to share that in Solachai. So Rebbetzin Friedman was talking about, this is a little bit about the Parsha and the Sfira. Okay. And this was so beautiful. I just really felt I wanted to share it with everybody. Rebbetzin Malka Friedman. So during this time with counting the Sfiras HaOmer, we are proceeding forward, and we're in a process, and and so she brought up the story of the Kotzker Rebbe, a Hasidic Rebbe, and he had a follower, and he only had family for Pesach at his Seder, But he had a follower that kept nudging him and nudging him and nudging him. He really wanted to be at his Seder and begging him. And finally he said, okay, you can come to my Seder, but why do you want to come? And he wanted to see Eliyahu Hanavi, because in the Seder there is a part where we open the door and we celebrate Eliyahu and we invite him in. And he comes on Pesach. And this follower of the Chatzker Rebbe knew he would come to the Rebbe, and he was very excited to see him. So when it came time to open the door for Eliyahu, this chassid runs to the door. And he just ran. And the Chatzker Rebbe says to him that Eliyahu Hanavi doesn't come in from the door. He comes in through the heart. Beautiful. And the problem is, not the problem, but an issue is that he is the angel of the Brit Milah. So we're talking about, in this week's Parsha, we're also talking about the Brit Milah, the circumcision that is required of every Jewish male child. And he goes on to say, the Chatzker Rebbe is telling his chassid that Eliyahu Hanavi comes to every bris, and he's a leader at every bris as a koach. Koach means like as a force, as an energy. And he's a representative of the integrity of every bris milah, of every circumcision. And he comes to preserve the integrity of the covenant, because the bris milah is the covenant between the Jewish male and God. And the problem, he continues to say, is we don't let him into the heart. He's coming, he's waiting, he's begging, and we don't let him into the heart. And what is the koach? The energy, the force, is representative of the covenant that all the Jews made with God. And it's a stamp on the Jewish integrity in the flesh. And it says that Eliyahu comes with this closeness and this clinging and this relationship. And the truth of this integrity is the yearning between God and the Jewish people. And when we let Eliyahu Hanavi into our hearts, it's a gift. That's the beginning. Hi, Miranda. Welcome. So happy to see you. We have so many people we have Israel, we have New Mexico, we have Sedona, Arizona, we have Minnesota, we have Florida, we have California, and I'm sure there are a few other places and I often coming on is a friend of mine from India also, but I don't see them on yet. So it says that the quality that has fallen into what we call tumah. So also in these double parsha that we're reading, we're learning about what we call tumah and tahara, purity and impurity. So the word klipa means actually husks, shells of impurity. So it says that there is an energy emanation like chesed, like gevura, like tiferes, that falls into what we call tumah, impurity, klipa. And also there's an aspect that falls into holiness, into kedusha. So there are two things in the Sfirat HaOmer that are happening simultaneously every day. We're trying to take something out of the klipa, out of the unholiness, and we're elevating it into holiness. And this is in the universe, and it provides for us a tremendous opportunity of change, that it's the beginning of change. So we know that there was the binding of Isaac, and then we have the process of Pesach, and then we have the openness of the heart, and we want to let Eliyahu Hanavi in, and then we go, there's so much going on in the Torah, and then we go into the Sphira of counting the Omer. But what is God giving us through all these different things? The gift of repairing the midos, repairing the emotive qualities, the emotive attributes. So let's say the attribute of chesed. So we know chesed is loving kindness, but it also can have a negative. It also, let's say that when God provides rain in the world, it's an act of chesed, it's an act of loving kindness. But what happens when there's too much rain? Then there's flooding and there could be destruction. So there's always the klipa, the tuma, the unholiness and the holiness. And we are taking in ourselves these midos, these emotive qualities that we have, that we've worked on in our life, that we've acted out on. And we are fixing them. We're fixing them, and we're only going forward. We're not moaning and groaning and, about what has happened in the past, but we're taking them each day of the counting of the Omer. We're fixing them and we're going forward. And this is a gift from God, this fixing of the midos. And we fix 2 a day. And how do we have to go? We go from minus 49 to plus 49. So we really have 98 to work with in this time of the counting of the Omer. And we're doing 2 a day. So we're taking the one that has fallen into the klipa, into the unholiness, and then we're taking the one that is in the holiness, in the kedusha, and we're lifting from the minus 49 to the plus 49. And we go with each one, and we need to understand that the midah, the emotive quality that comes into the klipa, and what then it looks like in kedusha, how you refine it and how you work with it. And I know that Simon Jacobson, and I know there are other people who have put out books and things to ponder and think about of how to rectify in one's life what this really means on an everyday practical level, that how you can rectify these different emotive qualities. So when we say the blessing and we count, the whole world is resounding from it, and the whole universe, and we come to understand these midos, these emotive qualities in ourselves, and we focus on what is the spiritual quality of the day, and it's an opportunity of change. And the beginning of this journey of finding this new reality, that we might not even recognize the change. We're working on it, but we might not even recognize it. But it doesn't mean that the change didn't happen. So I think that's so important, to work on it and trust, have a trust that it is going to happen. It is happening. And our eyes are filled with the limitations of the flesh. So we can't always see depth. We don't see the process. We don't know how God is returning our souls to us. We don't even see every single morning. We say Moda Ani, we thank God for returning our soul. The same way as Elisha, the prophet. So there's the story of Elisha, and he was a prophet. And there's a woman called the Shunammite woman. And when he would pass through that town, he would stay there. And she provided a room and a candle and a chair and a bed and a table for him. And he wanted to thank her. For a long period of time, whenever he would pass through that town, he would stay there. And he wanted to thank her. And he asked his servant, ask her what she needs. And she was so content in her life. She said she's fine. She doesn't need anything. He said, I'll speak to the king. I'll speak to the... So the servant told him, they have no children. And so he blessed her with a child. And she had a son. And after a few years, the son was in the field. He didn't feel well. He came home. He lied down and he died. And she quietly left him in his room. She didn't say that he died to anybody. And she went to Mount Carmel, where Elisha was, to find Elisha. And eventually he came. First he sent his servant. Then he came back to the house. And it says, he laid down on the lad and he put his eyes on the boy's eyes, and his mouth on the boy's mouth, and his hands on the boy's hands. And he blew breath and life into him. So it says, in the same way, God returns our neshama, our soul, to us each day. God places his eyes on our eyes. Not that Hashem has eyes, but poetically. He gives us, and what does he give us by placing his eyes on our eyes? He gives us physical vision. He gives us the capacity, he places his mouth on our mouth, and he gives us the capacity to speak and to go beyond mundane speech and to speak in holiness, in Kedusha. And he puts his hands on our hands, and he gives us the ability to go of mitzvahs, to do mitzvahs with our physicality. So we aren't limited by the physical. We are unlimited, and we're able to go to great lengths in this area of spirituality, in this area of what we call ruknias, which is spheres ha'omer. So there are two parshas, and the parshas are talking about what we call tahara, purity. So in this parsha, it's also talking about the process of women and a woman's cycle and what it has to do with tumah and tahara, purity and impurity. So the question is asked is, what is tumah? What is impurity? Impurity is not a punishment. It's a process. It's a way of serving God. And what does it mean is we're lifting up what is in the depths of impurity in the world, and we're elevating it back to its source. So when you take tumah, when you take impurity, and you turn it back into purity, you're elevating it to its source. And it says a woman is given an extra portion to do this because of Chava, because of Eve, because she turned the world into plan B. What was plan A? Plan A was Mashiach should come, we should live in the Garden of Eden, spa all day, I don't know, have a great time. But what happened? Plan B happened. She was seduced by the snake, and she in turn seduced Adam with eating with her. And we are a continuation of Chava. We're fixing the process which has been obstructed, and it is not a punishment. It's very important to understand. It is not a punishment. So you can ask, there's a mine full of diamonds, and you go into the diamond mine, and how do you come out? You come out dirty, and you come out covered with schmutz, and you say, but like, why even go in there? Why should you look like this? And then you say, I might be dirty, but look what's in my hand. I have a handful of diamonds. So sometimes spiritual avoda, spiritual work, is an elevation of that which is steeped in impurity. That we're taking that and we're elevating it, we're shining it, we're cleaning it off, we're taking the dust and the dirt off the diamond, and we have the diamond underneath it. And not always do we understand what it is. So we need this process of purification to come out of there. And it's a merit to be able to do it. So we learn different things in these parshas that we're studying. One is what we bring to the Kohen, and one is what the Kohen takes out. So now we have to go further. We have Passover, we have Matzah, then we have the Shavuos, we have the receiving of the Torah. So Pesach, the mouth speaks, represents aliveness of speech. Matzah represents lechem oni, the bread of the poor. And it says, and we're bringing all these together. And in Torah, it is called and we bring them together, and then we have Torah, and Torah is called the life of the world. Tefillah, prayer, is called the life of the hour. So Torah is the ability to differentiate between tumah and tahara, purity and impurity, between kosher and not kosher, between forbidden and permitted. And Torah is a life handbook of how to live our lives and connect to God. And we need a handbook, and we need direction. A person can't be ignorant and say, I feel close to God in my heart. I'm a cardiac Jew. So in the prayer Aleinu, we say people bow to nothingness, emptiness, and nonsense. Why? Because if you don't have the handbook, then the person has no ability, doesn't have an understanding of how to deeply connect to God, that we're doing things for ourselves. So in meditation, the meditation needs to have Torah involved in it if one wants to feel Hashem, because we're finite, and a finite human cannot relate to infinity without some kind of guidebook, without some kind of handbook. It's like saying to a person, I'd like you to have a relationship with an ant on the floor. So there's more ratio between a person and an ant than a person and God, but God gave us the Torah, and it is the presentation of himself in the world so we can relate, so we can be close, so we can have a relationship. It goes beyond the physical brain, and we relate with our soul, and we relate with Torah. So also, we want to separate what is this process of Sfiras HaOmer and clarifying, rectifying the different traits, is separating the good from the bad. So the Torah is telling us how to deal with sparks that have fallen, and every Jew that is created in the world has sparks to lift up. You have your own personal sparks to pull them out of the darkness and return them to their source. And only through Torah we have a job of separating. Torah calls it the life of the world, is called the life of the world, because the world has 6 directions: up, down, right, left, front, back. And we're talking about the midos, the qualities of purity and impurity. And we've refined our midos, our qualities, in all 6 directions. And the 7th, the direction of Malchus, is gathering everything together and wearing the yoke of heaven. And that is how we elevate the world. And it is hidden. These things are hidden, and we're trying to reveal them. And these challenges are like sparks of holiness that have to be elevated. And we, with the counting of the Omer, we take them out of Klipa, we take them out of unholiness, and we put them back into holiness. And we're separating the sparks, we're pulling them out of this unholiness, we're returning them to their source. And in prayer, it says that we pray, and it's a process of lifting everything from down to up, from us to God. You're lifting up your soul in this kind of a relationship, and we're born in the world to do this. This is what we are created to do, to raise the roof, raise the sparks. And the Baal Shem Tov says that this process of tefillah, this process of prayer, the sparks that are lifted back to their source, this is the life of movement, and we can change and move things. So when we eat, we say a bracha, we're lifting up the sparks, and we're bringing it back to God. So we take what's halakhically appropriate to eat, the kind of food that's kosher, we check it, we make sure there's no bugs, we take Meiser if we have to, we make something to eat, we take what's appropriate, and we elevate it from a realm of unholiness to holiness. And we do that with blessings, and we do that with the after blessings, and we lift it, and we have strength to daven, and we have strength to work. And it takes us back to our source. Everything we do can connect us to our source. And that is from the time we wake up in the morning and we say Moda'iyah, we say a bracha, we are elevating our lives. So we are separating out the sparks that we have to lift up from where they're all mixed up in the impurity of the world. And Torah has to be clarified, and we gather our sparks and we elevate them, and we study and we learn. We learn Torah, then we pray, then we learn again, and it represents the angels that were going up and down the ladder that Yaakov saw. That's represented by our davening, our prayer, our our learning, our prayer, and then going back to learning, because we're calling from the depths of our love for God and our connection to God. We're reaching up into the infinite. And the soul, we say, the soul in the Modeh, the soul you have given me is pure. So there's an inner paradox of physicality. We're trapped in our own limitations and feelings that don't let us go beyond ourselves. But we need to expand the depth of this limitation, and it comes from truth, from understanding, from knowing our own limitations and working on them. During this time, total change is possible. And it's really the yearning of the soul, because the body mostly wants to go back to sleep, and the soul wants to make that connection. So we want to motivate our body to serve God, and the body becomes part of the process of prayer, and it allows the mind and the heart to connect to God, so that we can function on that level of soul. We can connect our soul. And after davening, after our prayer, the soul is happy to come back in the body. We're happy with our bodies. We're happy to move forward, because the body has helped the soul join in a partnership. This yearning to connect to God, this yearning to have a relationship. And this is what counting the Spirit is about. And we want to go back to Pesach. We want to take the chametz, and we want to rid ourselves of that, and we burn it. And how do we do that? We're separating the bad from the good, and the good from the bad. And we're taking it out of our heart. And that is what we're doing in counting the Omer. We're separating, we're taking the chametz, still, the impurities out of the heart, and we're separating the good from the bad. And we do this by studying, like we're doing now, by studying Torah. And separating, matzah is the speaking. It's lifting the soul to God. And it's also called the bread of emunah, the bread of faith. So we're integrating faith in ourselves, and we're elevating ourselves. And we know that on the second day of creation, God created the waters. He created the upper waters, the higher waters, and the lower waters. And the lower waters cried out to God, we don't want to be separated. We want to, but they had to be separated to give life force from the world, to have, otherwise we'd just be totally absorbed in this life force and not have the work that we have to do in the world. So our job is to reconnect the waters, reconnect what has been separated. We have Pesach, we have Matzah, and we have Shavuos. And we're separating the bad from the good, and we're lifting it up through our mouths, meaning our purpose. We have to know our purpose, and we're given the ability to see beyond the physical. What am I focusing on? What am I doing that's beyond the physical eye? Meaning in your everyday life, in your waking up, in your making breakfast, in your shopping, in your cooking. There is a level that is beyond, that we actually can see beyond, and we add that quality, and there's this story of the Lulav Rebbe, and he and his wife were very poor, and a great tzaddik, a great holy person was coming to his house, and they were going, and he wanted his wife to make something. They should have something that this guest could make a blessing on. And she took some water, and she had a little tiny bit of flour, and she mixed it together, and she made pancakes. So when they were on the way home from where they were going, he said, I want to stop off at the house again, see if there's any more of those pancakes. And he said, because they had the taste of Gan Eden. So when they got home, they asked her, like, what did you put in the pancakes? Because you only had water and flour. And she said she prayed to God to add the spices, to add that essence to it. And it's about intention. It's how you do something. Because you can have a person who has everything, all the luxuries and all that, and their intention is not there. So the Beis Arin of Carlin says God doesn't ask us for results. He asks us to try. So you start, you try, and then God completes the process for us. So the Sfiras HaOmer, how is it going to be completed? It's going to be completed in Shavuos. So we're trying. That's all we can do. It doesn't mean you have to reach a certain place, but you do have to try. And we're trying to become close to God and to connect to Hashem and to have this close relationship. And our heart is experiencing, our mind is expanding and yearning. And we're trying to concentrate that God doesn't ask for the results. He asks us to try. And he's knocking on the door. Hello. And we are reading now in these weeks about Tumah and Tahara, about impurity and purity in the Parsha, and about lifting the sparks out of the impurity and elevating them to Kedusha, to holiness, and to prayer. And we are half of a whole, and without God we are not complete. So we're doing this process and we're opening our hearts, and that's why we want Eliyahu Hanavi to enter our hearts and to be able to help us to achieve that deep connection and that inspiration, and to be able to sustain that inspiration. So, L'chaim. So I want to go over a teaching. From Rabbi Lord Jonathan Sachs, because about something about circumcision that's in the Parsha. But before I do the teaching, I just want to tell a story that always impressed me, always touched my heart many years ago about circumcision. So I met somebody who told me the following story, that a Russian. So in Russia, for anybody who doesn't remember, although it is hard to forget, that the Jews, now there's kosher restaurants, there's Jewish schools, there's, oh my God, you can't even believe what's going on there. All the graves are accessible, the holy sites. But there was a time, very recently, that the Jews were murdered and tortured and put in jail and sent to Siberia for teaching, for doing what we're doing tonight, for learning Torah, really. And Jewish things weren't allowed, that, to have a Jewish wedding. And I remember I have a friend here that's Russian, and my husband performed the wedding. And their parents came from Russia. Actually, the parents were still living in Russia at the time. And in their whole life, they had never been at a Jewish chuppah. And they were Jewish. We're still trying to get them. Now they live in Texas, and we're hoping that they will do a Jewish chuppah. But it hasn't happened yet. But so one of the things certainly that was not allowed was circumcision. It was absolutely forbidden. And if a moil, who is the person who does the circumcision, was caught doing a circumcision, he probably could be killed, sent to Siberia and killed. So this friend of ours said they were in Russia, and there was a moil that was, they knew, that arrived because organizations in America would send people into Russia all the time, and for many things. I know my friend Miriam Rhodes went into Russia, and she was teaching how to do taharas. And it was a very dangerous. I mean, some of her stories and how she had to travel and wear a babushka over her head and then have something around her mouth so that it looked like she had a toothache, so she couldn't speak because they had to drive through a military installation, and if they were caught, many, many different things. And so this moil came to Russia, and he was going just from place to place where he knew that there were that there were babies that were many months old. They had been born, many months before, and that they needed to have a bris. And he went to one home, and the baby was about 10 months old. And, it's a big baby, and meaning that sometimes there's surgical procedures also, and I'm not exactly sure and how they did that one. And then there was another home he went to where the baby was still young and a few months, and he did the bris, and at the end of the bris, the mother just grabbed the child and was just kissing him and kissing him and kissing him and kissing him and just weeping and kissing her child. And the moil said, he's okay, don't worry, I'm a great moil. No, he didn't say that. Your baby, he's fine, don't worry, he's fine. And she said, no, that you don't understand. She said, I knew here in Russia it would be basically impossible for my child to have a bris. And I thought, I need to sacrifice something. I need to do something in order that it should happen. So she said, I decided that I would not kiss my child. I would hold back from, I hugged him and I was warm with him, but I wanted to kiss him so much, but until he would have his bris. That would be my personal sacrifice. So it's a big thing, it's a very, very big thing. So this is a teaching that is fascinating from Rabbi Sachs. So he says the Parsha, this week's Parsha, if you read it, Tazria, begins with childbirth, and it says, and it talks about a male child. So I just want to say that when a female baby is born, that her holy soul is immediately connected to her physicality, and that covenant is established. But when a male baby is born, that holy soul hovers around until the bris comes, and that bris then solidifies that holy neshama with the body, and there the covenant for a male is then established. So on the 8th day, it says the flesh of the foreskin shall be circumcised. So this is called Brit Milah, not just a Milah. Milah is, the word for Milah is circumcision, and a Brit Milah is the covenant of circumcision. So it started before the Torah was given on Sinai. We know that Avraham Avinu was circumcised, but it says that he kept all of the laws of Torah and all the mitzvahs, and the only mitzvah that he did not keep internally, meaning because he knew to keep it, was the mitzvah of circumcision, because you can only do circumcision once, and there is a difference in doing mitzvahs when you're commanded to do the mitzvah than when you do it from your heart and soul. And he wanted to be commanded to do the mitzvah and fulfill the commandments of God. So he was circumcised at the age of 99 years old, and he waited until he was commanded. So it says it's not just a mitzvah like any other mitzvah, but it's a covenant. It's a sign of a covenant with God, and with God with us. And why on the 8th day? Which is very interesting, because if you remember back a week to Parsha Shmini last week, which is called the 8th day, that it dealt with the inauguration of the Mishkan, which is the sanctuary, and that also took place on the 8th day. So is there a connection, you might want to ask? So there is a very interesting midrash, a very strange midrash, and here I'm going to read it to you, the following. So there was an encounter between the Roman governor, Tyrannus Rufus, and Rabbi Akiva. So Rufus began the conversation by asking whose works are better, those of God or those of man. So surprisingly, Rabbi Akiva replied, those of man. So Rufus responded, but look at the heavens and the earth. Can a human being make anything like that? So Rabbi Akiva replied that the comparison was unfair. Creating heaven and earth is clearly beyond human capacity. Give me an example drawn from matters that are within human capacity. So Rufus then said, why do you practice circumcision? And Rabbi Akiva Akiva replied, I knew that you were going to ask that question, and that is why I said the works of man are better than the works of God. So the rabbi then set before the governor ears of corn and cakes. The unprocessed corn is the work of God, and the cake is the work of man. Is it not more pleasant to eat the cake than the raw ears of corn? So Rufus then said, if God really wants us to practice circumcision, why did he not arrange for babies to be born circumcised? So Rabbi Akiva replied, God gave the commands to Israel to refine our character. So this was a very odd conversation going back and forth. So the Rabbi Sachs is going on that the Torah tells us that for 6 days God created the universe, and on the seventh day he rested and said it was holy. And what was his last creation on the sixth day? Was humanity. He created the first man, Adam, and the first woman, Chava, Eve. And what happened? They sinned by eating the forbidden fruit that was on that day, and God sentenced them to exile. They had to leave the Garden of Eden. But he delayed the sentence of exile for a day to allow them to spend Shabbos in the Garden of Eden. And when the day came to a close, they were about to be sent into the world, into the darkness of the night. Shabbos was over, it was nighttime. And God took pity on them and showed them how to make light. And that is why we light, one of the reasons, we light a special candle at Havdalah, not just to mark the end of Shabbos, but also to show that we begin the workday week with the light that God taught us to make. So the Havdalah candle, therefore, represents the light of the eighth day, and that marks the beginning of human creativity. So just like God began the first day of the creation with the words, let there be light, at the start of the eighth day, he also showed humanity how they could make light. And it says that human creativity is parallel to divine creativity, and the symbol of that is the eighth day. So we know from studying last week that the Mishkan was inaugurated on the eighth day. For 7 days it was put up and taken down and put up and taken down, but on the eighth day it was inaugurated. And the Mishkan is a microcosm, a cosmos in miniature. So we know that the book of Exodus begins, and the book of Bereshit begins, Genesis, and the book of Exodus ends with stories of creation. The first by God and the second by the Israelites. The eighth day is when we celebrate the human contribution to creation, meaning they built the Mishkan under God's direction. So this is also why circumcision takes place on the eighth day, because we know all life comes from God. And everyone is made in God's image and likeness. And children are the fruit of the womb, provision of God. But it takes a human act, which is circumcision, to signal that a male Jewish child entered the covenant. And this is why it takes place on the eighth day, because 8 signifies entering into the covenant. And just like when the Jews stood at the foot of Mount Sinai, and what did they say? All that God said we will do, and we will obey. So the covenant, the special nature of the specific covenant that God made, there was a reciprocal connection, first with Abraham, then with Moses, and then with the Israelites. But this is different than the universal covenant that God made with Noah and with all humanity. So the covenant that God made with Noah involved no human response. That what was the content was the 7 Noahite laws: do not kill, set up courts of law, do not tear a limb from a living animal. And what was the sign? The sign was a rainbow. But God asked nothing of Noah, not even his consent. But we, Jews, are in a covenant with God, and it's a little different. But all humanity has this covenant based on laws of morality. This is what was dealt with Noah. But to be Jewish is a particular covenant of reciprocity, thank you, with God. God calls and we respond. God begins the work and he asks us to complete it. And this is what the act of circumcision represents. That God did not have male boy children circumcised, said Rabbi Akiva, because he left this act for us to do, for the sign of the covenant. So now we're going back to this conversation that was made between Rabbi Akiva and the Roman governor, Tininus Rufus. For the Romans, the Greeks, and that world, the gods were found in nature: the sun, the moon, the sea, the sky, the seasons, the fields, and fertility. In Judaism, God is beyond nature. The covenant takes us beyond nature. So for us, not everything natural is good. War is natural, conflict is natural, competition is natural. Jews are inspired by the God of Abraham, and we rise above nature. Nature's in the world, and we rise above nature. And the Romans found circumcision strange because it was unnatural. Why not celebrate the body like God made it? So God said, so Rabbi Akiva said to the governor that this is not the end all and be all, that we go above nature. So God left creation unfinished so we could become partners in its completion. And by responding to God's commands, we become refined. There's a process that we can refine ourselves by following the commandments of God, and that God delights in our creativity and helps us along the way by teaching us how to make light. And this is the idea of the eighth day, that God set us in the world to become his partners in the work of creation. And it says that people want to pass their genes on to the next generation. And circumcision is talking about how there is something higher than nature. And the covenant for the Jews was based on fidelity and sanctity of marriage and consecration of love to bring new life into the world. It was based on something that was beyond the natural. And God created physical nature, and he asks us to be co-creators with him. And the Gera Rebbe said, when God said, "Let us make man in our image," to whom was he speaking? He was speaking to man himself. And God said to man, "Let us, you and I, make man together," meaning the symbol of co-creation was the eighth day, the day that God helps us begin to create a world of light and love. And that is why the circumcision is on the eighth day. And I just want to read you a few things, because one of the things that always struck me in Torah was the whole concept of circumcising the heart. So that we divide the word milah, circumcision, we divide it into using God's name and the whole act of circumcision. And the foreskin is what is removed, and that is a cover that conceals and obstructs. So when you remove the foreskin, it's an uncovering. And in Kabbalah, it's said to signify the uncovering of the name of the first two letters of God's four-letter name, the Yud and the Hey. And this is related to what? To chesed, to loving kindness. And the eighth day, on which the circumcision takes place, is also related to chesed. And it says, so when the circumcision is done on the eighth day, there's a manifestation of the Yud and the Hey of God's name, with encompassing grace and love. And it also says that there's a circumcision involves two aspects. The taking off of the layer around the foreskin, and the uncovering of the thin membrane under the foreskin. And that is done by the moil, and often it's done before the baby is brought out for circumcision. It's really sometimes the most difficult part of the circumcision. And it's called an uncovering. And that we're talking about the heart now, because everything has to relate to us in the physicality. So we're removing the coarse foreskin of the heart, and we're removing the thin membrane that comes under it. And these two things represent the crude or coarse corruption of mankind, and the less noticed, delicate, or subtle corruption of the heart of mankind. It is difficult for a person to purify themselves of that subtle corruption of the heart. But when the person will make the effort and achieve this quality of Mila, of circumcision, the removal of the outer obstructions, and it says God will circumcise your heart, and will do what we call the priya, which is the removing of the thin membrane, that delicate inner membrane that is so subtle that we might not know it is there. And it says that when Mashiach comes, that will be removed, and there will be an uncovering of the full name of God, the Yud and the Hey and the Vav and the Hey, and then the divine name will be complete. So it will be completed through this aspect of circumcision, which is, all of these things have such a different understanding when we learn about them, and we learn their purpose, and we learn what they are and what they're about, and to have this covenant, and that is needed for a male. That's also why a male wears a yarmulke. That's why a male is obligated to pray with a minyan. Many things in the physical to keep him physically rooted and have that connection with God. So I want to do there are many more pieces, but I'm just going to do one more piece because I am in Miami, and it's a different. We're in a different time zone. I'm practicing for Israel because my heart is set on Israel is going to reopen to foreigners, although I don't think I'm a foreigner, to non-Israeli citizens, let's call it that. And I'm going to continue teaching, and then I'll be up with Sarah, Lydia, and Nomi at 6 a.m., and then it will be 8 p.m. in California. 6 a.m. I think is easier for me because I'm always up every morning at 5 than 1 in the morning, but we'll see what happens. I also stay up late, so I don't know why I'm complaining. So we want to be guided to live in God's image. So we have Abraham, Isaac, and Jacob, and Rachel, and they prepare the ground for our relationship with God, and we receive the Torah, and it's like a wedding day. So the giving of the Torah lifts us above our nature, lifts us above the human realm, and we relate to God in a relationship, and we tap into the spiritual, and he gives us an empowered observance in nature and above nature. So in this parsha, it's a double parsha. In one of the parshas, it talks about leprosy and the days of purification and what's needed to purify the leprosy and how the Kohen approaches the leprosy. But it's talking about time. How many days? Time is essential, and in many mitzvahs, time is specific. For instance, lighting Shabbos candles. There's a specific time. Once that time is gone, you're no longer lighting Shabbos candles. You could be lighting pretty candles, but they're no longer escorting the holiness of the Shabbos into the world. So I wanted to share this with you. I actually learned this with Chana Rachel Shissaman today. And it's a story I've heard before, but it was really kind of inspiring to bring it into the counting of the Omer, and so here this. So the Rebbe is teaching how to relate to time. So every year, Tishrei time, there would be a group of people from out of the country, many Israelis, many people from France, from England, from different countries that would come to the Rebbe. And then they would go back home, and they would come in a group, and they would come for a final blessing and for talk by the Rebbe. And often it was right after the holiday finished, and they were all going to make a plane, and they were all on the same plane if they were going back to Israel or going back to France. And they would come for what's called a yechidus. A yechidus is a one-to-one a connection with the Rebbe. And he made a special gathering, and he was speaking to them. And as the evening progressed, the Rebbe saw people looking at the clock, because some of them had to pack, they had to get to the airport, they had a plane that was leaving, and some of them started to get a little antsy, even though they were in the presence of the Rebbe, and they were glanced at the clock on the wall, and they were getting a little anxious. So the Rebbe smiled and told them a story. He said, I'm going to tell you a story to calm you and how you can look at time. So he said, in the 1920s in communist Russia, the Frierdiker Rebbe, the previous Rebbe, was in charge of the head of the underground network, and he was watched constantly. There were spies everywhere, there were informers everywhere, and he was always being watched. And late one night, the Rebbe, who was our Rebbe, said he entered the study of the Frierdiker Rebbe, and after, for several hours, the Frierdiker Rebbe had been seeing people in what we call yechidus, which is one-to-one appointments with the Rebbe. Now, when the Rebbe, I really, truly had the privilege of meeting the Rebbe. That was our Rebbe. The Frierdiker Rebbe passed away in 1950, so that wasn't the Rebbe I met. And when the Rebbe would meet you and be with you, one of the things that was so notable was that he was totally focused on you. Meaning that in the moments that you were with him, there was just you and the Rebbe. The intensity of each connection was extraordinary. And so the Frierdiker Rebbe had been seeing people for hours, and obviously it is exhausting, and the intensity takes a huge amount of focus and concentration, et cetera, and he had just finished, and he was sitting in his study, and in a half hour he had a train that was leaving for Moscow, and he was going to meet somebody from a foreign country who was going to give him funds for some of his projects, all which was illegal, all which was not permitted by the government, illegal, and could be very nerve-wracking for anybody. And the Rebbe was just sitting there calmly. And the Frierdiker Rebbe was sitting there calmly, as if nothing was happening, if he hadn't just been standing for hours seeing people. He was completely focused on what he was doing. And the Rebbe, and so the Rebbe, his son-in-law, came in, and he was very surprised. And he said he was working so calmly at his desk as if it was a regular day with nothing else was going on. There was no strain. He wasn't tired, and he wasn't nervous about the train and face-to-face with the government and receiving the funds from the foreign person, the dangerous situation that he was in. And he said you can't add time. So the Frierdiker Rebbe saw that he was nervous, and he said you can't add time, but you can be present to the time that there is. Like you won't have an extra minute, you won't have an extra 5 minutes, but you will have extra time if you're present to the time that is. And he says, you are here. The Frierdiker Rebbe said, you are here. The Rebbe said to the group of people that he was seeing, You are here. Focus on being here. Focus on being in the present. Live in what you are doing now. And the quality of the Rebbe Marash, going back to today, is that Tiferes represents balance, relating to our divine service, how we count the hours, how we count the days, how we are present in the time that we're in. And time is a gift, and it's meant to be used with partnering with God. So we need to focus. The Rebbe was saying, focus with a panemius, focus with an innerness, with an integrity, with a consistency, and pay attention completely to what you are doing. That knowledge, experience, action all bind together and form the complete person and come from the inside, and be deeply aware of important things. And there will be shining a light on what you are focused on. And where we put our focus, be present to that. Connect ourselves to that. So in the Hayom Yom, which are little snippets of wisdom and inspiration that was gathered by the Frierdiker Rebbe for each day. So for Tuesday, he was talking about his father, who was called the Rebbe Rashab, who was present at a Farbrengen during the time of the counting of the Omer. And someone said the Alter Rebbe's Hasidim were always counting. And he said this saying found favor in his father's eyes. And this was the comment of the Rebbe Rashab. He says this holds true with regard to divine service. One's hours must be counted, and in this way the days will also be counted. And when a day passes, we must know what we have accomplished and what we have yet to accomplish. All in all, we must make sure that tomorrow will be far better than today. Just inspirational words. And I just want, even though there is a lot more to learn about, I wanted to teach a piece on Lashon Hara and praise, but I might do that next week because I'm going to stop in a minute. Because I'm in Miami and it's 1:45 in the morning. But I want to read, this is so beautiful, I love this piece, the Hayom Yom for today, okay, for the 18th day of the Omer. So it's tonight to tomorrow. So it says, all character traits, even those that are not good or even evil in name and description, can be used as a lesson in serving God according to the Torah. In this vein, the saintly Reb Meshulam Zusha of Hanapoli, whose grave I had the privilege of being with my husband and praying at. So it says, the saintly Reb Zusha of Hanapoli learned several approaches to divine service by pondering on the work ethic, so to speak, of a thief. That's what it's saying. You can learn from everything. Number one, a thief is modest. Number two, I'm going to read the footnote because it's interesting. He goes about his tasks without fanfare, like not calling attention to himself. To describe the thief's secretive manner, Reb Zusha borrowed the pious phrase, what does God require of you? The verse answers, only to act justly, to love acts of kindness, and to walk humbly with your God. So he was saying, he's describing the thief as walking humbly with God, no fanfare, not speaking about what he's doing. Number 2, a thief is prepared to endanger himself. Number 3, the minutest details are as important to him as greater considerations. Number 4, he labors with great exertion. Number 5, he works quickly. Number 6, he exhibits trust and hope. And number 7, if he fails the first time, he tries again and again. So that is the wisdom from Reb Zusha. And there's so many beautiful stories about Reb Zusha. And I just want to thank everybody for coming to the class today. I love teaching the class in Miami. I like staying up. I actually am spending the day tomorrow driving a distance out of Miami to see my 96-year-old aunt and my almost 80-year-old first cousin in 2 different places, and it's very exciting to me to be able to visit family, and especially people that I've grown up with and love and haven't seen in quite a while. So I want to wish everybody l'chaim, my water, of course, and for those in Jerusalem, I don't know if the day is beginning or over, but a fabulous Yom Ha'atzmaut with celebration, with joy, with safety, with appreciation of how deeply lucky, and I know everybody who lives in Israel is totally appreciative. And I just want to say my grandson, who is a paratrooper in the IDF, was given they got another pin or award or whatever, and he was given a special award for being so, I don't know if the word is kind, but for being so enthusiastic and joyful all the time and lifting the spirits continually of all the boys that he's with. So we're very proud of our Ari and l'chaim, and whoever needs a refuah shlema, we should be bless them. Bashalea, get your birthday blessings on, and I know that you're blessing everybody here that needs a refuah shlema, a complete healing. And whoever would like a shidduch should have a shidduch, and whoever needs children and health and joy, and whoever wants to come and lie on the beach in Miami, text me, I'm here. Okay, so thank you everybody for coming to class, and have a beautiful week. And don't forget to count your sphera, and even if you've forgotten so far this whole time, tonight is 18, go forward. You can still count the sphera every single day. Okay, thank you. Bye everybody.